everyone and welcome to Ezay Learning. First of all, thank you very much for your appreciating comments and I'm very much pleased to see that these videos are helping you. So I was searching about a ABAT mock exam and we are going to attempt this one because we have already done this from our own website and we are going to try this ABAT mock exam free from Quizmaker. So there are multiple practice MCQs here. I would suggest you to try as many practice MCQs as possible because these are going to help you with the fluency of attempting the quiz. These are going to help you in understanding the scenarios, the case studies and the conceptual or even terms that might be a part of your ABAT exam. So let's start the free quiz here. In ABA, which term refers to adding a stimulus? So whenever we talk about adding a stimulus, it's positive. When we talk about removing, it's negative. So this one is definitely something positive. As you can see, there are two options for that. After a behavior that increases the future probability of that behavior. So basically, when we talk about increasing the future probability, it's about reinforcement. And when we talk about decreasing, that's punishment. So adding positive, increasing probability, reinforcement. That is positive reinforcement. Which data collection method records the time between the presentation of an SD and the initiation of a response? So this means that you have given the instructions. You have presented the discriminative stimulus and then before the initiation of a response. This time would be the latency. So the time between the presentation of any instruction, any SD and the initiation of a response is latency. Inter-response time is basically the time between two responses and then frequency is the number of counts of responses of behavior. Duration is the total time taken for that behavior. During DRA, what is reinforced? So the DRA, the term itself will tell you the answer, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. So a specific alternative behavior that serves the same function would be reinforced in DRA. Stimulus control is established when a behavior occurs more often in the presence of which stimulus. So when a behavior will be occurring when there is any cue for reinforcement and ST is something that cues the availability of reinforcement. Discriminative stimulus is the one when a behavior occurs more and that's how stimulus control is established. Forward chaining begins training at which step of a task analysis? So basically forward is the one that starts from the first step and backward is the one that starts from the last step. So this one is the answer. Which prompting strategy across trials begin with the most intrusive prompt level and systematically reduces intrusiveness as the learner gains independence? As you can see, it started with the most intrusive and then the intrusiveness reduces, so that would be most to least prompting. A behavior occurs at a very high rate. Which discontinuous measurement is best to avoid constant tallying while still estimating occurrence? So momentary time sampling is the one where you also calculate the occurrence but you don't have to collect that data all the time. Non-contingent reinforcement primarily functions as which type of intervention? So non-contingent reinforcement is the one that is not dependent on the consequence of the behavior. So non-contingent reinforcement is antecedent intervention because it is not based on the consequence. In a token economy, what best describes tokens? So tokens are the one that you exchange with the main reinforcer. So tokens basically are just generalized conditioned reinforcers. Those are the general reinforcers but they are attributed to any of the reinforcer. They are conditioned with something majorly reinforcing. Which preference assessment exposes the learner to all items concurrently without removal? So that is simply free operant preference assessment, because you are just exposing the learner to all of the items and you are not removing anything, you are not presenting one thing or two things at a time. So that would be free operant preference assessment. Extinction is best defined as which procedure? So when we talk about extinction, we often say that it is about eliminating a behavior, but basically it is a behavior that is previously reinforced and you withhold the reinforcement for that behavior. That is the basic definition of extinction, even withholding the maintaining reinforcer for a previously reinforced behavior. Inter-observer agreement IOA primarily evaluates which aspect of measurement. So IOA is the measurement in which the data is collected by two or more of the observers, and that is to evaluate the reliability of the data collection, because if all of the observers are getting the same or similar responses, similar data, we can say that the data is reliable. Which is an example of differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior DRI for hand mouthing, and both of the behaviors are incompatible with each other, which means the target behavior cannot be done at the same time. For example, we are talking about hand mouthing here. If we reinforce holding a chewy tube in the mouth, hand mouthing cannot be done. So this is the perfect example of incompatible behaviors reinforcement. Which statement best distinguishes MO from ST? So MO stands for motivating operation and ST stands for discriminative stimulus. Motivating operation means something that is altering the value, and ST means something, a stimulus that cues the availability of reinforcer. So option B, MO alters value of a reinforcer and ST signals reinforcement availability. This is the right answer. When implementing extinction for attention maintained behavior, which consequence is appropriate? So you have to implement extinction for attention maintained behavior. Obviously, the extinction can be done if you are withholding the attention, because you are withholding the reinforcement, and that would be only following the problem behavior, not on every behavior and not all the time. A crisis plan directs staff to implement protective holds. What is the ABAT's first obligation? So you have been given a crisis plan. All you have to do is to follow training and agency policy to ensure safety, because you cannot call the supervisor while the event is happening, while the behavior is occurring. You have to you have to handle that behavior first. So follow the training and agency policy, and then right after you can inform your supervisor. Which is an example of response cost within our token economy? So response cost is defined as the cost that you pay following a certain response. So when we talk about token economy, so if a client is being given some tokens for a certain behavior, and if he does something against the target behavior, against any of the goal, and the client has to pay the response cost, that would be removing earned tokens following target problem behavior, because we are talking about paying the response cost within a token economy, so obviously it would be related to tokens. Also, providing extra tokens for appropriate behavior is not a response cost example, because that is something being taken away. If data shows an increasing trend with high variability, the most responsible next step is to, now remember, you are attempting these MCQs as an ABAT, as a behavior therapist, so there are some specific ethics, specific policies related to it. So if a behavior is increasing with high variability, it does not mean that you can simply switch to a new target, or you can change the plan, or you can stop taking data on it. the most responsible next step in this scenario would be to consult the supervisor before modifying procedures. Within ABA agencies, appropriately credentialed clinical supervisors, for example BCBAs or qualified licensed professionals, provide what type of oversights to ABAT's delivering services. So, the credentialed clinical supervisors provide clinical supervision consistent with scope and credentialing rules. It is appropriate to change data collection definitions mid-study without documenting the change. Very basic. Obviously, you cannot just change the data collection mid-study and even without documenting the change. That would be false. Okay, so this was one of the ABAT mock exam. There are many more. We can attempt those. You can also search by yourself on Google or any search engine. You can search ABAT mock exam. You can search RBT IBT mock exam or behavior therapist MCQs. Anything related to behavior therapy. You can attempt the quiz and you can understand the current skill level. I would suggest to attempt at least 4 to 5 different mock exams on daily basis, and I also have a whole video on planning how to study for a BAT exam, so you can simply visit that and prepare your own study schedule as per your routine and as per your speed. Now I just found another thing that they have multiple ABAT mock exams and then they have mock exams on specific domains. So I would suggest to visit this website and attempt as many MCQs as possible.